Hello everyone, I'm Bethany Lacy from Korea University, and today I'm going to be talking about promoting multimodal literacy in an EFL class with a biographical picture book. When someone mentions picture books, you probably have flashbacks to your time as an emergent reader. A is for apple, one curious monkey, a cat in a hat. But I'm here today to show you that authentic picture books can be used for much more than just young, developing readers. They are also an invaluable resource for older readers and readers who are learning another language. Popular picture book writer Anthony Brown said, "Picture books are for everybody, at any age, not books to be left behind as we grow older. The best ones leave a tantalizing gap between the pictures and the words, a gap that is filled by the reader's imagination, adding so much to the excitement of reading a book." Now, you may be thinking, it's his job as a picture book writer to say that. But researchers and educators alike not only agree with him, but have gone even further to look into the benefits of using picture books for different age groups. Frank Serafini and Anne M. Dolan are two proponents who have urged parents, educators, and readers to see the educational value in using picture books in classes, above and beyond early readers. Picture books are multimodal, meaning the content is presented using two or more methods. In most cases, picture book stories are told through illustrations and written words. However, they can also be told orally and aurally, through joint readings or through audiobook versions. The combination of words and images, with one as equally important as the other, can enhance the reader's ability to comprehend the story and see the events from another perspective. In turn, the reader's reading and cognitive strategies can be further developed. Improving these critical skills can bridge gaps among and increase empathy for people from different countries, cultures, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Besides learning about people from various backgrounds, picture books can also be used to teach about abstract ideas in an easily digestible manner. Let's take a look at this excerpt from Richard Panshick's book, World War II for Kids. The page looks fairly standard for a children's history book. We have a deluge of text explaining in depth about the end of World War II. To the side, we have a small image that supplements the text, although it's not directly related to the words on this page. It's just kind of there. The image is a small bonus to the text, but we would be able to understand the written information perfectly well without this image. The image also breaks our attention away from the text. We may be tempted to look at the picture and read its caption before reading the words next to it. The words in the main text and this image are not meant to be read simultaneously. So let's get a little more into my research here. I used a picture book about World War II and the history of film to teach both vocabulary and content. Lotte's Magical Paper Puppets was written by Brooke Hartman and illustrated by Catherine Carr. This is a biographical picture book that features the life of Lotte Reiniger. Lotte made the first full-length animated film in the 1920s using a multiplane camera and shadow puppets. The book not only references Lotte's filmography, but it goes into depths about how World War II affected her personally and Germany as a whole. All of the illustrations in the book look similar to this cover. Limited color palettes, but detailed shadow puppets that merge the literal and figurative together. The participant in the study was a Japanese middle school student who was an intermediate level English language learner. The student was able to have long conversations, express their opinions, and use deductive reasoning while speaking in English. While the student was interested in animation and art, They did not know much about the history of animation. They also had limited knowledge about World War II, especially on a global scale. I started this research project on December 8th of last year, 2020, by giving the participant a pre-test vocabulary assessment. We ended the project on May 11th, 2021, with the participant completing a post-test vocabulary assessment. Let's move on to the methods. The participant took a pre-test vocabulary assessment in person using Google Forms. The post-test assessment was administered online during a class session. The pre-test and post-test assessments were identical and both were made through Google Forms. The test had 30 questions and was split into 2 parts. The first 15 questions instructed the participant to match the target vocabulary word with the appropriate synonym. The second half of the test had moving images and required the participant to choose the most appropriate action verb. Lotte's Magical Paper Puppets includes many action verbs that invoke strong imagery with native English speakers, but words that may be unfamiliar to non-native English speakers. 15 action verbs were chosen from the reading to see the participant's familiarity with them. Words like We had a total of 10 reading sessions from January 12th to April 6th. The sessions were usually once a week, but there were a few gaps due to holidays and scheduling conflicts. Each session was 50 minutes long, and we followed the same format throughout the reading. I would show the participant the images without text first, and they would answer my comprehension questions and describe the images. After we finished discussing the illustrations, we would read the text. I would ask comprehension questions about the text and answer any questions the participant had about new words. We would then compare the image and text to each other to understand the context of the entire page. The important thing to remember here is that the illustrations were treated as an equal entity to the words, not as a secondary medium. So here is one page from the book that shows Lotte, bottom, and her husband Carl Koch, on the ladder, using their multi-plane camera to create their movies. Now again, the text portion of this page was cropped out when I showed the participant the page, and they could only see the image. At first, the participant had difficulties understanding what represented reality and what represented fiction in these images. The participant thought that the smaller shadow puppets were ghosts at first, instead of representations of Lotte's films. Not only did the student have difficulties in discerning the difference between literal and figurative, but they also had some problems understanding some of the historical representations in the book. I want to show you our conversation about the filming process shown in this illustration. The student had never seen a real camera like the one depicted here. However, the student did recognize the film, and they knew from previous reading sessions that Lotte loved movies and wanted to tell stories. Now, in the same image, Lotte has placed a puppet of a man fishing in a boat on the top pane of glass. The middle pane has ocean waves, while the final one shows mountains in the background. The student had some difficulties in understanding that the top puppet was a boat, but once they made that realization, they could easily understand that the middle pane showed water. Through talking about the images here, the student could begin to understand the multiplane filmmaking process that was popular in animated productions. I kept asking the student to use their prior knowledge from the reading and general knowledge until they could piece together the information on their own. Once the student could understand the images, we moved on to the text. I read the text first, and then we discussed new words together. For most of the new vocabulary words, I could give the participant an example of a related word, and they could easily understand. A lamp is a light on your desk. Brass is a metal that trumpets are made from. Pane is how we measure large pieces of glass. A window pane is a sheet of glass. Lend a hand means you help someone. And again, after discussing these vocabulary words, the participant read the text aloud. This was the process we went through for the entire 10 class sessions, using Think Aloud reading techniques on both the images and the text. We focused on reading comprehension and discussion while reading Lotte's magical paper puppets. Now, I want you all to see how the images changed from depicting the process of creating animated films to World War II. The shadows here invoke a sense of fear due to their perspective, due to their angle. There is nothing magical or happy about these images. The student could easily understand that the shadows represented Nazis in World War II, although the book does not explicitly mention either one. The student talked at length about the colors and how they felt while looking at this illustration. The vocabulary words on this page were difficult due to their more abstract nature, but through discussing the horrors of World War II, the student could understand the words' meanings. Then we also have this page in the picture book that shows a mixture of Lotte's fairy tales and Nazis. Now, the student did have difficulties understanding the symbolism in the illustration at first. The text on this page also brought up the topic of propaganda, and the student and I were able to discuss real-world, current examples of that as well. After we finished reading the book, the student's homework was to watch one of Lotte's movies on YouTube. The student needed to write a short summary of the events in the movie. All of Lotte's animated films are silent films, so the student didn't need to worry about understanding dialogue. The student chose to watch 2 different movies, Hansel and Gretel and Cinderella. But during our class session, we only had time to talk about Hansel and Gretel. During the next class session, the participant talked about all the main events from the movie, such as Now, let's take a look at the study's results. The participant took the same vocabulary exam on December 8th and on May 11th. The 30 questions were in the same order and contained the same content. The student correctly answered 53% of the questions on the pretest assessment. After the reading and after our discussions, the student answered 90% of the questions correctly. The standard error mean shows that similar results may be achieved on a larger scale. Or if another researcher were to reproduce the study, they could expect similar results. Looking at further analysis, the p-value shows that the differences between the student's pretest and post-test vocabulary scores are highly statistically significant. This result suggests that the in-class discussion positively impacted the student's vocabulary acquisition for the target vocabulary. Now again, the vocabulary instruction was through discussion and think aloud reading techniques. There was no other writing or matching during our class sessions. It is worth mentioning that the student answered 2 questions incorrectly on both the pre-test and post-test assessment. The 2 questions asked the student to match tearing, as in cutting or ripping, to the correct synonym or action. However, both of these questions had a word related to tearing's homonym, tearing, as in crying. These 2 similar options should not have been included on the test. After the student finished their post-test vocabulary assessment, they had to write answers to a 10-question writing exam. I want to highlight a few key points in the students' answers. Although picture books carry a stigma of only being for young children, they are a teaching tool that can be used with any age group. Picture books can help explain processes that students are unfamiliar with, like Lotte's process for making her animated films. They can make readers question what is real and what is a facade. They can help explain abstract concepts through visual representations. Picture books can also talk about socio-political issues, whether they are insinuated or explicit. And finally, picture books have authentic text and vocabulary. Even when picture books have difficult vocabulary, the words are usually presented together with images that will help readers understand the entire context. These 5 things together with discussion can help develop readers' critical thinking skills and content learning, whether they are reading in their first language or an additional language. For readers who are reading in an additional language, picture books can assist their language learning. So the next time you want to introduce a difficult concept or historical moment to your students, why don't you go ahead and have a look and find the picture books that can make your job a little bit easier. Thank you all for joining my presentation. I would like to open the floor for any questions or comments now.